Congratulations, you've just found the #1 over 50 health and wellness podcast on the planet. Hello and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm a healthy aging expert and founder of The Silver Edge, and I am on a mission to help men and women just like you build lean, strong, healthy, capable bodies they love for the rest of their lives. Okay, so let me ask you guys something. Have you ever eaten a big meal, maybe even gone back for seconds, and still found yourself standing in front of the fridge an hour later thinking, I just need a little something? Well, you are not alone. The truth is, most of us are overfed but undernourished. We're stuffing ourselves with food-like substances that are loaded with calories but practically empty when it comes to real nutrition. And today's guest is here to help us unpack all of this. I'm joined today by Dr. Jeffrey Burke. He's a leading expert with over 40 years in the natural products industry. He's a renowned educator, author, podcast host, and a guy who's spent his entire life helping people just like you navigate the confusing world of supplements, natural health, and optimal living. In this episode, we are diving into why your food isn't what it used to be, how our food supply is quietly robbing us of the nutrients we need, and how to be a smarter, more discerning consumer when it comes to what you put in your body. We're talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of modern food, supplements that actually work, and the surprising ways regenerative farming just might save our health. This one's packed with practical tips, so whip up your protein smoothie and let's jump into my conversation with Dr. Jeffrey Burke.
I come from a family that was pretty nature-oriented, if you will. My grandmother used to dandelions out of the yard and make tea, and
Nice.
I think she was probably one of the first people to have a pot on her stove making bone broth, but back then she used to call it cups of love, and you would go to her house and you'd get a cup of it, and you just never said no, you just did it. And I went to college. I worked part-time at a health food store, and then I moved to Los Angeles, and I started with Dr. Earl Mindell, the author of the Vitamin Bible, way back in 1980-ish.
Oh, yeah.
Here we are many years later. He was the one that gave me my first microphone, and I just never gave it back. And last year, I ended my long 42-year running radio show after 20,000 some shows, and I've been blessed to work with amazing people in the industry. I've seen the metamorphosis of natural products happen. And then I went through microphone withdrawal and started a podcast because you got to talk.
Yeah.
It's just been amazing. I've been able to see so many things, visit so many places. I do amazing amounts of retailer trainings all over the country. And now I speak with doctors as well. It's just been a lot of fun. It's never been a job. I've never worked a day in my life.
Yeah, that's how you know you're winning, when you get to where you are, right? And say, I've never worked a day in my life, just really invested in my passion. All right, so it sounds like from early on then you had the groundwork to be where you are today. Grandma was making bone broth and dandelion tea, and I had a similar sort of upbringing. I was raised on a beef cattle farm, and my mom was really into a lot of the same thing. Us kids would go out and we'd pick violets, and she'd make violet jam, and as well as having a big garden. And I was very closely connected to food and to natural remedies. Now, you mentioned that I think you said in college there, maybe you were working in a health food store. So let's talk about that, because that would have been at the early ages of health food stores. Talk to us a little bit about the history of health food stores and natural products and things of that nature.
This was a health food counter that was in a store. I went to University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. So it was a small little place, and believe it or not, it was a candy store in the front. And then
no kidding.
Back
health food in the back?
Wait, it gets better. It was the long counter in the back, and they sold cigarettes on this side and vitamins on this side.
Right on.
It's terrible. And I learned a lot there, and I had so much fun, and it just kind of kept cementing my passion in the industry. And, back then we didn't have Google, we didn't have search engines, we didn't have cell phones, computers, nothing. So any information that I got, I had to learn from someone or go to a library and read a research book, So when I went to Los Angeles, I started in one of the largest chains out there. It was called Great Earth, and they had about 180 stores. And I was 20. And I started in the smallest store. And a year later, I was heading up all the stores and didn't really know what I was doing, but I was learning along the way. And I'd already started doing radio shows by that time and just kind of fell in love with it. And now being able to, kind of see the trends of where we started so basic to where we are today, it's amazing.
So what might one find in a Great Earth store, 40 years ago, whenever that was, 45 years ago? What sort of natural products would I see on the shelves there? What were you guys selling?
Synthetic vitamin E, a lot of ascorbic acid, vitamin C's,
Mm-hmm.
vitamin D and omega-3s and flax oil were on the bottom shelf because nobody ever talked about them because they didn't know any.
Wow. Yeah.
Acidophilus wasn't even called a probiotic back then. Very low potency. You were recommended take it for a week around an antibiotic and then put it in your refrigerator till you needed it again.
Mm-hmm.
But low potency, kind of blends, rudimentary kind of nutrients, things like bone meal and dolomite were your sources of calcium. But basic protein powders, you had like a milk and egg, and then you had like a glandular ground up cow glands, so that there wasn't really a lot of stuff. There was no natural chips, there was no natural sodas, there was no natural foods, there was no gluten, there was not even barely organic at that point in time. So it was just kind of starting out. And the mentality was kind of like, I want to look into this vitamin thing. People were still looking down on it. The doctors were calling us witch doctors. So we've come a long way. And I think one of the funniest things was I was working at a store in Westwood, right near UCLA, and we were doing inventory. And it was after hours and there was a knock at the back door. It was doctors from UCLA hospital coming to get their vitamins, but they didn't want their colleagues to see them in the front of the store. So we've come a long way.
We have come a long way. All right. Well, before we go any further, let's back up. Let's define what are natural products. When you say you're an expert in natural products and natural product history, you've been in that industry your entire life. Let's put some parameters around this. What the heck is a natural product?
A natural product can be defined a lot of different ways. It could be something that is naturally occurring in nature that Mother Nature handed to us, and we're using to its full capacity, or we're using a part or a portion of things like herbs, and even today, fruits and vegetables and grains and tree barks and mushrooms and all that kind of stuff. These things are put into supplements. Not all supplements are natural. A lot of them are still synthetically based and synthetically manufactured. A lot of pharmaceutical vitamins do not use a lot of natural ingredients. Natural ingredients cost more. I think they're more recognizable by the body. It's kind of a way of being able to give your body the things that we should be giving our body if we were living the healthy lives that we should be living, that we know to live, and we know we should be doing, but we still don't do it. And in many cases, only when an emergency happens do we get the motivation to make a change and switch over. So I would say if it's a natural vitamin, they're vitamins that are made that are utilizing the full capacity of the plant or fruit or vegetable or bark or mushroom that has not been synthesized or synthetically bonded or using something that's genetically modified.
Okay. And so distinction there between synthetic and natural. And I think that in a lot of our minds, the first place we go is that one or the other, depending on maybe your preconceived notions, one would be better, right? Synthetic sounds, ooh, okay, well, there's science. And perhaps somebody's got a patent, right? So I'm thinking about drug companies. I can patent this and I can sell this versus natural. If I'm just taking bark and mushrooms and other compounds that I'm not able to patent, and therefore my ability to make millions and millions of dollars is probably lessened. Is there, when you look at, from your perspective, when you look at the difference between synthetic and natural ingredients, do you automatically say, well, natural is always superior?
I think,
Or
I think,
is it more nuanced than that?
well, I think natural is more recognized by the body. I think the body can
Okay.
recognize it a little bit better. When you think synthetic, a lot of times you think pharmaceutical and pharmaceutical drugs. The mentality that goes with it is they act a lot faster. But the problem is, in many instances, a synthetic drug that has their place. Don't get me wrong, I have people that are on this planet due to medication or still on the planet. But the thing about it is many times the pharmaceutical drugs have a tendency to work more on the symptomatic nature of whatever it is that you're trying to balance, where the natural takes a lot longer, but you may be filling the voids and the empty parts that need to be refilled to bring your body and give it the capacity to do what it should be doing if it was working at a full capacity. I hope that makes sense.
Gotcha. It does make sense. Yes. And certainly I think, the listeners of this show are sophisticated enough to know that modern palliative healthcare and the pharma industry, very much in the industry of for the most part, treating symptoms as opposed to root cause. And we've had many fun conversations going down that road. But I want to go back to this filling the void, because I think this is where the rubber kind of meets the road. You had mentioned that the reason we have natural supplements, natural products, is because we're, again, filling a void, and that void being nutritional primarily. I mean, sun as well. There are some, of course, movement. There's a lot of things that we're probably deficient today that, say, even just a few generations ago, we wouldn't have been. So talk to us a little bit. Why are we so deficient that there's this ginormous market for natural products and supplements? What's happened to food supply over the generation, over the last 100 or couple hundred years, that causes such a big market for things like natural products and natural supplements?
Well, we don't really eat food anymore. We eat food stuff. We eat things that are modified, that are pasteurized. We're eating things that are synthetically made. Our palates have been retrained to gravitate toward foods that taste really good to us, but the nutritional value is almost nothing, because you can be overfed and malnourished at the same time.
Yeah.
You can be overfed and have deficiencies that you're not meeting. And the other thing is, a lot of times we are not giving our body the things that the body is craving. And you may eat something that you really enjoy, but you're hungry an hour later because your body says, I really enjoyed that. That was quite tasty. And I know it was terrible for me, but would you mind giving me something that I could use? So we're overeating because we're still trying to fill the voids, even though we just got done eating. And you see it with people that'll eat dinner and all of a sudden they're standing in front of the refrigerator or the pantry, like, what are you looking for? And they're like, I don't know, but I something. And we're reaching for things that make a difference. Our growth has been amazing as population. The baby boom is down a lot in this country, but around the world, we're still making babies. But in the early 40s is when they launched organic. And it really started to take hold in the 80s. And that's kind of when, I was starting. And it was amazing that you could bite into a fruit or vegetable and it had no chemicals, no synthetic herbicides in there at all. And it tasted so much better. So if you could afford organic, it was preferable. So here we are 45 years later. We still have organic. The problem is the organic is not what it used to be. It doesn't have the chemicals, which is still good, but our soils have been ignored for so long that now we have to start addressing the soil. They say that about 60 years from now is about all we have time left on the topsoil on our planet, because we've been over-tilling. Most of it's blowing away. We don't use cover crops like regenerative. So regenerative agriculture is really starting to be important, because it's not just about the crop. You can grow organically, but you have to protect the soil, which means cover crops and helping to draw carbon dioxide into the soil, not tilling, because when you till, you lose your topsoil. So this is really important. So where it was in our state of mind with organic 45 years ago, now the new state of mind is, yes, I still like organic, but now I have to protect the soil. So that's kind of where we are, because people don't realize regenerative agriculture can actually increase the yield of what you're growing 2, 3, 4 times. So we're growing more, but we're also very dense growth, very nutritious growth from soil that you develop the microbiome, and it's not stripped and it's not barren and it's not naked like many of the organic fields that are out there. So it's a different way of looking at things, that I think it just comes down to the point that we've been putting so much empty calorie nutrition into our body for so long, and we love it and we're hooked on it, and it's like a drug for us to be able to eat the junk because we love it. And now we have to just retrain our mind and realize that you can make healthy food taste good too.
Yeah. Okay. So I love all of that. There's a ton to unpack there, but let's start with this. The problem is kind of the food supply, right? And recent studies show that over 70% of Americans' diet is made up of processed and ultra-processed food. You had alluded to this food as being hyper palatable. Let's face it, it's cheap, it's delicious, and it is scientifically designed to cause us to overeat. I don't know if you're aware, but there are some really good studies out there where they put groups of humans without instructions on how to eat, and they're given the choice of whole foods as well as hyper palatable foods, and they're just they're left there for a while. And then we have a group that only has a selection of whole foods. And of course, we're going to give them a washout period and then we're going to swap them, right? And this has been replicated several times. And in every time, the group that has access to the hyper palatable food is overeating by like 500 calories a day, which is a shocking amount of overeating as a nutrition coach, right? I mean, that is really scary when you look at that. And to your point, what's happening there is we're getting more calories, clearly, and we have quite a problem of obesity and overweight in this country as well. But not only that, we're eating these really empty calories. And not only are they not nutrient rich calories, these processed and ultra processed foods, but oftentimes they've got colorings and additives. And like you said, if it's not organic and it's been sprayed with glyphosate, and then we have traces of that, and just this whole cascading effect on our food supply that has really caught, I suppose that now we're being aware that, we need to start to shore up other, in order to be healthy, optimal human beings, we're gonna have to shore up our nutrients, and hence the vitamins and the supplements, right? So there's that piece of it. And then I think it's really interesting that you bring up the whole regenerative farming piece. I feel it's hard for me to say because I come from this background and I run in these circles, but I feel like this is starting to get some headwind and it's starting to break into popular culture. But I think part of the problem is when I go to Whole Foods or to my local supermarket and I go to the organic section and I buy some organic spinach, some organic peppers, which if I can afford that, I should. But what I don't realize is that didn't come from the farm right down the road that was picked yesterday. That was monocropped, probably in Central California. I'm on the East Coast. It was monocropped in these very depleted soils. It was then shipped to a warehouse, and then it waited for a truck to come and get it, and it was trucked across the United States. It went to another warehouse. It went, and then from that distribution center, it went out into the stores where it was stored in the back till it was put on the shelf. And all this time, I've got this, let's say, this spinach that once upon a time would have been a very, like you said, 50 years ago, this would have been very different spinach. It would have been grown in this very nutrient-dense soil. Instead, it's just monocropped. It's money. We're trying to feed millions of people at scale. And that food supply is just deteriorating and deteriorating and deteriorating. So even if I'm doing the best I can, I'm going out and I'm buying the organic vegetables. It's just not the same vegetables it was 100 years ago. Is that a fair assessment? Those nutrients and minerals aren't there, are they?
100%. You are 100% on key, on note, on point. And that's exactly what it is. I had someone say the other day, she said this and it stuck with me. She goes, we don't have a healthcare system in this country. We have a sick care system.
Right on.
And organic is not about what you're getting. It's about what you're not getting, which is chemicals and preservatives. It's not the plus anymore. It's just telling you that you're not getting any of that bad stuff. You're not getting a lot of good stuff, but you're not getting any of the bad stuff. So that has dramatically changed. And I understand that organic is a lot more expensive. And I do understand that the journey on most of these things are coming from a long distance away. And I do think that regenerative, I'm already starting to see some of the grocery stores around the country, the natural grocery stores that are setting up regenerative vegetables now, regenerative fruits coming from certified regenerative farms. The farm that I work with Kokora out of Costa Rica, is a certified organic, certified regenerative farm, and the soil was just actually given the designation of a gold standard that has never been awarded before because of the quality and the integrity of the soil. So that's really something to think, because you're growing. Here we have these wonderful nutritional supplements that we can say regenerative on the label and legally say it and mean it and be happy about it. So I think we're going to start to see regenerative sections in health food stores, both in supplements and in food.
Yeah, I've not seen here where I am regenerative labels yet, but I'm really excited to hear this because, like I said, I feel like probably because of the crowd I hang with, and look, social media gets me, right? It's going to feed me things I'm looking for. So Kevin would like this regenerative news, so I feel like it's starting to become more mainstream. So it's very encouraging to me to hear you say, "Hey, we're now labeling things regenerative." But let's pick that apart because I think it's worth spending a few more minutes on. So somebody here listening, maybe in an urban environment, is not really sure. They kind of get the gist of what we're saying when we say regenerative. What's a regenerative farm? What might that look like?
Well, if you let's look at a traditional farm. A traditional farm, they till the soil, they plant, they load it with pesticides and herbicides, and they kill everything around, and whatever's left grows, and they take it to the store. An organic farm, they till the soil, They just don't use any herbicides or any synthetic ingredients. They have a major weed problem, which usually comes because of the fact that, they don't have anything to kill the weeds. That still gives them a really beneficial effect. And their crops are usually about 50% less than a traditional farm. Okay, now enter regenerative. Regenerative are these large farms. Well, I'll tell you about the ranch in Costa Rica, 109 acres. It is all regenerative. So the difference is they do not till. They plant, but they don't turn the soil, so there's no loose soil blowing away, number one. Number two, they do cover crops, which means if you grow turmeric, in between they may grow mucuna, and then they'll grow turmeric. So when you see nothing but green. Now, all this green, number one, holds in moisture. Number two, it also draws down carbon dioxide out of the environment, out of the air, and brings it into the soil where it belongs. They say that if we could switch our farms to regenerative agriculture, we could do more for global warming than getting rid of gas-powered vehicles. So that's quite amazing that we could reduce that. And on top of that, because we make these wonderful things, it's funny, it's called Emmy down in Costa Rica. They capture the bark and the leaves and the trees and the tubers and the mushrooms and all that, and they grind it up, and then they mix it with semolina flour and green banana and coffee grounds and eggshells, and they mix it all together and put it in 50-pound bags, and they put it in 200-gallon water containers, and it soaks and it leaches out, and it makes this golden brown liquid, and that's what they use. So it builds the microbiome in the soil. It builds wonderful culture. They use something called a yeoman's plow. It's not a plow. It has shanks that pulsate. And what it does is it opens up the soil about 24 inches down, and the tube brings that liquid down into the soil. So you have this wonderful soil, and the nutrients, I mean, things grow so quickly and so big and so vast. And that's what makes everything healthier. So you're not just getting a great crop, you're getting a healthy crop. And you're probably getting 5 times the crop, so that's beneficial. You take some of these countries where they have so many people and food supply is limited, they could be growing a lot more vegetables and fruits. And for their supply, farmers would make more money and everybody would have healthier things to eat. So it is a mission that I want to be on. And I think it's important. I'd get in front of Congress. I want to start doing initiatives for farmers to switch over to regenerative in this country. Because they would make more money. It would be healthier for the public. But, that's that kind of regenerative. It's thinking about the soil for today, tomorrow, and for the kids and down the road, not just for today.
Hey there, Coach Kevin here. Quick pop quiz. What's stopping you from losing weight over 50? If you said your age, your metabolism, lack of time or motivation, or I just love cookies too much, think again. Chances are you're making at least one of the top 5 weight loss mistakes that almost everyone over 50 makes. Good news, I made a free guide to help you spot them and fix them. Grab your copy now, the link's in the show notes, because you're not too old and it's not too late. Now let's get you back to the episode. Okay, well, thank you for that. I think that gives us a really good sense of regenerative. I think here, I live on a small farm, and for example, I've got chickens, and they are fed organic food, and they're free range. They eat mostly bugs and things they find out and about.
Love it.
But they are given feed as well. So, and I have straw. So I've got straw that is their bedding that I occasionally will clean out. That goes into a compost. I have llamas on the property. Now, our llamas are also given some organic food, but for the most part, they're just walking around and crunching on things. And they're not even given, so the chickens are giving no medicine. The llamas are not given even heartworm or anything because the poop is picked up every single day, which is quite a commitment, but it's a commitment to not have to medicate the animals. That poop is then stored and it is gold. It is gardening gold. So our gardens are eating all of this nutrient dense, like you had mentioned, hey, we're making this liquid gold with this compost mixture. So we actually sell some of this, like the llama manure, for example. There's a sign out in front of the road that says llama manure for sale. Just come down the dirt lane and help yourself, folks, if you're here in my neck of the woods, if you want some gardening gold. But my plants, my blueberries, my seasonal gardens, everything is planted with this gold, with this nutrient gold. So when plants actually need to eat, and when we deplete the soil, we have to have some way of replenishing. So you had mentioned when we constantly are tilling and we're blowing away the topsoil, and if we're not planting cover crops in between, and the reason people don't plant cover crops in between is greed. let me back up. That might be a little harsh. That is the reason, but it's really, if you're a large corporation, it's for the shareholder. You're increasing shareholder value by making more money, basically. If I can just crank out crop after crop after crop, I can collect more money and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I love this idea about more and more farmers becoming regenerative farmer and us supporting those initiatives as consumers, because really the market's going to do what we, the consumer, dictate. I think that as we're becoming more health aware, we're voting with our dollars every day. So being aware of this, I think, is a great first step. I also love the idea of supporting local and supporting your local farms. The food doesn't come from halfway across the country. In some cases, our produce comes from other countries, but you're supporting a small farmer down the road. So farmers markets are one of my favorite places to shop if you have that available to you. So absolutely love all of that. All right, so regenerative farming, I think everybody gets a gist of what that is and how that can improve the quality of their food. If you think about once upon a time when there was buffalo all over the land, they would have naturally done this for us, right? The hooves are constantly nicking up the soil, and they're pooping all over the place, and that is feeding these grasslands. So we had these huge plains, and there was this very natural system. So the natural system of nature has regeneration and regenerative farming, if we will. The farming part is man-made, but then the natural system has this baked in. So is it fair then, Jeff, to say that we're trying to just recreate what nature's already perfected? We're just trying to do this at scale. Is that a good way of looking at these initiatives?
I think it really is. I think it's a way of going back to a time when things actually worked before we got too smart for our own britches and thought that other ways were better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that arrogance and entitlement, and many times people think that, we have to reinvent the wheel. And I think sometimes we don't, because there are better ways of doing things. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, look at technology, but there are also basic ways that still make sense, that we could be utilizing. But sometimes we technologically push ourselves into a situation where things may be moving faster, but the quality and integrity is completely dissipated.
Oh man, yeah, true, very, very true, absolutely. But it is interesting to see this intersection of modern technology, modern knowledge, and more ancestral wisdom. I feel like the intersection there is fascinating. I suspect that's kind of where you live most of the time. I would suspect. All right, well let's leave regenerative farming for a minute. I want to talk about supplements, and I guess one of the first places we could start is let's start with regulation. And I'm just going to ask you straight up, you a pro-regulation guy or not so much? And just so folks know, things like drugs are heavily regulated here in the US. Things like supplements are not. So what's your personal take on that? And let's start the conversation about regulation there.
Well, I think, the Déchet, the event that happened, back in the 80s, actually set the course for what could be said, what couldn't be said, because people were already at that point making claims that were totally illiterate in many instances, and giving promises to people, and people putting their lives on hold and things because they were told something that they shouldn't have been told. So do I believe that we should have regulation and information? Yeah. And I mean, I was on the air for 42 years. I knew exactly how far I could go. I used to call it walking on the edge of the cliff, standing on a banana peel, holding on a rope, because I knew how far I could go, but I also made sure that I treated the information with respect, and never wanted people to go on there and make ridiculous claims and curative claims and things like that. We have to remember that, we have to have some legislation. There is actually more legislation in place than people know about what they can say on labels, what they can say on bottles. And, and there is the label police that is out there. And I used to find it bothersome. Now today, as I'm much older, I look at it as a way of being a protector mechanism for the public. So I don't want somebody putting all their eggs in one basket, for a basket that's been alluded to do something that it really can't do, and then maybe not thinking about things that may have been proven and may have already been studied and maybe published reports on things that could really be making a difference. But you're listening to your friend's friend doing something over here, and it's completely in the wrong avenue. And today people don't want to ask questions. I think that the pandemic, if there was anything the good that came out of it, I think it opened up the door for communication for people that are now coming back into health food stores again, wanting and desiring and needing a conversation to be able to have, not just clicking online, and not knowing what you're doing or getting and not having a real person to talk to. I mean, I see it as I travel all over the country. I see people coming in, I do consumer lectures, and they're starved for information, but they're starved for honest and truthful information. And I think that's where we are. So do I think we need to be overly controlled? No, because I think most of the companies out there today follow a lot of the really good built-in standards. Do we have bad actors? We do. But so does every other company in the world and every other division of whether it's technology or real estate or whatever.
Right.
There's always bad actors. Do they end up squashing themselves eventually and karma coming around? Yes. But I do think that the companies that are doing it right are sticking together. And we know that as much as we hate to be told what to do, sometimes having a little bit of guidance is also a good thing.
Yeah, some guardrails. Okay, well said. So you had mentioned there, what did you say? We're hungry for honest and truthful communication when it comes to, especially in this area. And let's face it, there's so much noise, right? Because my coworker's uncle took this miracle supplement and this had, so right. So there's all this anecdotal, and social media just kind of really allows anybody to say anything. There's no regulation what we say on social media to each other about supplements. So it kind of is a wild, wild west. How do our listeners, people tuning in right here, how do they discern quality from crap? How do they discern the snake oil from what's going to move the needle, specifically in this natural foods supplement market? Are there some general guidelines that we can use to be more discerning consumers when it comes to selecting these products or companies we choose to do business with?
Yeah, I think we have to be realistic in many, many things that we do today. We have to realize that whatever we're trying to work with our health and our body, we didn't get in this state overnight. And although we want the magic wand and we want to wave the wand and we want to make it go away and lose 50 pounds by Friday and do all these things, we all want that. Who doesn't? I would love to open up a magic wand franchise. Be fabulous.
Let's do it together. We'll be rich. Yeah.
It's in realistic point of view. And I know this is kind of basic sounding, but there are things in our industry that are miraculous that really make dramatic results very, very quickly, but they're few and far between. And if you're being sold a bill of goods that things will happen immediately, and many of these things, a lot of times if it sounds like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck, meaning there's a good chance that it may be beneficial, but maybe not in the time period that you were sold, or it may be something that has a lot more hype and you really need to do a little bit more research. I tell people to go on PubMed. If you're really interested, read a study. Follow amazing podcasts like yourself. You're educating, you're getting people information. That's different than social media. Even though it's sitting on the same platform and they're sharing a couch, they're different. Because the problem is on social media, people that should never be giving nutritional or medical or health advice are doing it. And they're doing it because they have a platform. God love them for the platform. They've worked hard for it. I think it's wonderful. I think they could be bringing other information or maybe bringing quality people with the background to talk about it on their platform rather than trying to do it themselves. Because you see, things have exploded out here in health food stores because blah, blah said that it's going to change my world. And I love blah, blah because I follow blah, blah, and I've been listening to everything they said for the last 5 years. Okay, that's fine. But you have to stand back and take a look and say, seriously? I mean, am I really doing this? I mean, and I haven't even done my homework. So do your homework, ask questions, find a health food store, vitamin supplement store where you have people that are experienced and educated and friendly and knowledgeable and supportive, where you can go in and have a conversation. Go on PubMed, do some research on your own. Don't just go into AI intelligence and Google something on there because they're going to tell you what they want to tell you. And if you're really struggling for questions, then reach out. There are so many amazing podcasts that are out there that bring you the best. We bring people the best. That's what we do. We bring people with voices so that our listeners and our followers can learn. I mean, when you come on my podcast, I love my guests to talk. Talk. I don't like scripting. I like it natural. I like people to have a flow of information. I want people to walk away and say, God, it was so much fun listening to them. And then they're thinking, oh my goodness, I learned so much as well. I didn't even know I was learning. Those are what we need to do. Use these amazing podcasts as a tool. Radio's not what it used to be. I mean, you used to have to sit in front of the radio, and I'd have my people 3 times a day. They'd have to sit in front of the radio and listen. Now people can listen to podcasts anytime. Find people that you like, that you identify with, who you know have a message, who are honest and truthful, and you've done a little research on them, and they have a great reputation. Listen to them. They're going to bring you all the tools you need. And if they bring you the tools that you need, then you can make those decisions or have a conversation to get the extra information, because it's very confusing. And don't fall privy to the quick fix, because there isn't one.
Yeah, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Point well made. I think that certainly with the social media, what happens is we love things in 30-second sound bites. We just want this information. Whereas a podcast like this, or what are we? We're 35 minutes in, right? And this is a longer, more nuanced conversation, which supplements, natural products, all things health and fitness related deserve a longer, more nuanced conversation, because I can't convey in 30 seconds a very complex, nuanced topic. So to your point, yes, I'm obviously a huge fan of podcasts. Podcasts have changed my life, but there's a podcast on every subject. So yeah, finding some good, solid information. And obviously shout out to Honest Health, your podcast, where you have all the different guests on. Like you said, we're going to have these longer, more nuanced conversations. So I want to talk a little bit about just some other things here. You mentioned do your homework, find reputable companies, do your research. When I'm looking at specifically, say, the back of a supplement or a natural product, and what are there things there that can give me some hints? For example, if I see like proprietary blends, that seems to be a very popular one. For those of you out in podcast land, not watching this on YouTube, Jeff was rolling his eyes and making claw motions with his hands. So I'm intentionally triggering him with this word. I kind of figured I would. But yeah, one of the things I see very, very often when I look at this miracle supplement that's going to make me melt fat or whatever, give me energy or boost my brain power, and I look on the back and it's their proprietary blend. It says what's in the proprietary blend, but doesn't tell me, is it an efficacious dose? Is it even have anything to do with what the outcome they're saying? What are some things we can look for that are either red flags or say, yeah, this is more likely to be a better product if we're just looking at the label of a product?
First of all, I want to address proprietary blend. A proprietary blend is a way of making a label look really, really great. Meaning what it does is they make a laundry list, like a paragraph, and they make this huge paragraph, and then on the side it will say 2,000 milligram proprietary blend. So you got this laundry list of all these wonderful ingredients, but you have absolutely no idea of the potency or dosage of anything being used in there. That bothers me, because that is not what I call transparency. I think I like people to turn on the label, see the serving size on there, see the exact ingredients. If there's a botanical name, it probably should be used as well. The amount of milligrams and things that you're getting, or grams per dosage. And then the most important thing is actually the part that's at the very bottom. The bottom says added ingredients. If you have a load of magnesium stearate, silicon dioxide, if you have titanium dioxide, stearic acid, vegetable gum, propylene glycol, carrageenan and sorbates, phosphates, if you have all that stuff listed on the bottom, no matter how good these beautiful ingredients are at the top, you've added in all the synthetic additives to the very bottom. And the reason they do it is, one, for stability, and two, they do it to fill up the capsule. Let's say that you're doing, ashwagandha, and ashwagandha fills up about 80% of the capsule. They're going to dig in that laundry list of stuff to fill up that capsule to make it full. That's not adding anything good to the product. And I think with people's sensitivities today, the biggest part of transparency is not following a proprietary blend, because number one, you don't know what's in it. Number two, looking at the added ingredients at the bottom and seeing how much of this stuff is in there as well. Because what ends up happening is you're taking this beautiful formula that could have been wonderfully, let's say, even organic or even regenerative, and then you're adding this stuff in at the bottom. So it's kind of like 3 steps forward, but 10 steps back. So that is the biggest part for me to look at on your labeling. Always look for an expiration date. Also make sure that if you open it, there's a seal, that the seal is preferably sealed in there. It hasn't been tampered. I'm very partial to glass bottles. I think using vegan capsules is important. Not that I have this mission to cater to vegans. I don't, but I want vegans to not be left out. I want them to have the availability of being able to use a product. Because if I have this great product, but everybody can use it, but I'm using a bovine capsule, my vegetarians and my vegans, they're shut out. So I'd rather say, let's use a vegan capsule because these people really don't care. They're perfectly fine. Us normal people that are following that kind of a diet. And then I have my vegans and my vegetarians, and they're like, wow, I can use this too. So it opens the door for more people to get the benefit. So I think that's really important. So those are things that I think people should look for. And if you're not seeing a lot of this good stuff on the label, I guarantee you there's a brand next door or 2 bottles down that may have more of the things that you're looking for, but read labels.
Read labels. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we want to trust the company we're doing business with. So we got to do our research there. And then we're looking at the back of the label, and there's some green lights and red lights that we can be more discerning consumers from that. Now, let me ask you this. Do you have some favorite supplements that specifically in my age demographic, right? Or our age demographic here, right? Our age demographic here. What are some of your favorite supplements that are natural products that all of us should be taking for health, and why?
My list has changed over the years because after 40 years, what we used to need back then is different because the world is different today. But usually when people ask me for a list, I think it's always good to start with a really good plant-based multiple vitamin. It's kind of like laying the foundation for your home so the walls have something to attach to. Number 2, anybody over the age of 20, I think that they have most likely damaged their digestive gut, and they're probably not getting the full benefit of everything they're using. So number 2 is actually a combination of a digestive enzyme and a probiotic. That's number 2 on my list. Number 3 on my list is magnesium, because most people are deficient in magnesium, and it's reflected in everything from the heart to the brain, to the muscle, to the ligament, to the tendon. I think that's very important. The next thing that I recommend is an omega-3 fatty acid, whether you're going vegetarian and using flaxseed or whether you're using fish oil based, I think it's dramatically important. And vitamin D, I think, is also something. I come from a time when we weren't even allowed to talk about vitamin D back then because they considered it toxic in the early 80s. And now the doctors are testing us and telling us that we're deficient. So I think that that's my top. And then as far as herbs are concerned, I think that turmeric, ashwagandha, and functional mushrooms have really started to make a dramatic impact on the industry. And there's many, many areas outside of those that are connected to those. But, one is working on mental health. One is working on helping to give us a better support for putting our inflammatory levels back into a healthier level. And the other one does so many different things across the board, depending on the kind of functional mushroom you're using. But that's kind of the shopping list that I think many people could follow and make noticeable and dramatic changes in the way they feel. It's funny that you asked because I have a friend of mine, we were talking the other day, and he said something that was kind of funny. He said, I've been so unhealthy for so long, I've gotten used to feeling this way. So when I started taking all the supplements, I didn't know how to handle feeling better.
Yeah, 100%. So I've shared my story many times on this podcast, and that is why I'm here today. So in my 40s, I crashed and burned. I was as overweight, sick, unhealthy as I've ever been in my life. But you know what? It was my baseline. I didn't know I was sick. I didn't know I didn't feel good. And fast forward, there was a 3-day hospital visit, and there was a little bit of drama involved there. And as I came out of that, I was like, okay, I want to be not sick. And that was my mission, just to not be. And that's what most general doctors want, right? When you go to your physician, they're not interested in you having optimal health. They're just making sure you're not sick. And if you are, here's a prescription. That's what they're very good at in conventional medicine. And along the way, as I started to level up, as I first went from sick to not sick, I was like, holy crap, this feels great. What else is there? And then I started exercising. I started cleaning up my diet. I started cutting back the alcohol, just all the, started sleeping. I started working on my stress, and go figure, I started feeling great, taking supplements. Now, to be fair, I took every supplement known to man during that time because I wanted what everybody wants. I wanted the miracle cure. I wanted the quick fix. I didn't want to, I didn't want to change my lifestyle habits for the rest of my life, for crying out loud. And of course, look at me now. But yeah, I think that's very interesting that most of us have a baseline health, and we don't understand that it's not optimal because it's our baseline. We've been here for so long. And perhaps if you're like me, I was my circle of friends were all pretty much in the same boat. We were unhealthy. We engaged in unhealthy behaviors, and we had this prevailing feeling that it's just all downhill from here. This is just what happens. A very fatalistic outlook at aging, right? Which I've obviously not only have I turned that around, but now I'm championing against that mission, right? I'm here to tell you it is not all downhill from here. But yeah, I think that that's really interesting. I love your list here. So we've heard from other experts that some of these things keep coming up again and again and again and again. So a really high quality, I think one of the last guests that talked about make sure it's a methylated vitamin so that you're really able to make use of it. But the multivitamin, the digestive enzymes and probiotics, the magnesium comes up again and again and again. Omega-3 fatty acids, your vitamin D plus K2, right, for absorption. And then I love that we finish here on a couple of just natural foods. Turmeric, right? So that's for mental sharpness, you had said. That's really good. Is that fair?
Really more for stress and mental health and anxiety.
Stress and mental health,
and even
anxiety.
Ceilings that are out there because mental health's a mess. Where your turmeric is more of your mild to moderate balancing anti-inflammatory. But it also has...
So kind of ashwagandha also being in that camp, right? For anti-inflammatory? Okay.
And also ashwagandha, you'll see it in a lot of men's formulas, along with things like citrulline and arginine for natural testosterone enhancement.
Right. It's a testosterone support as well. Yeah. And then functional mushrooms for all the things, right? So the reishi and the turkey tail and the cordyceps and all these wonderful things. And they seem to be having a day here. All right. Well, lots of things, ways that people can get started there. Obviously, we're encouraging everybody to go out and find reputable companies, find people that you trust for information. Do your research. You are responsible for your health, not the government, not even your doctor. You are responsible for your health. So become an expert in your health. That would be my advice there. All right, Jeff, kind of as we're wrapping up here, I just want to ask you where you feel like the future of natural products is going. We have, it just seems like technology is galloping forward. We have now artificial intelligence pervading everything. Where do you see health supplements? Where do you see this market going in the next, in the short term, in the next couple of years? But where do you see it a decade or two out? Do we come to a place where we can afford to just eat crap and be sedentary and yet still have amazing bodies? What's your take on the science fiction future out here in front of us?
Well, number one, I think we have the technology on our side and the availability of formulations and the technology for manufacturing and formulating. I mean, who would have known that we could have a probiotic that didn't have to be in the refrigerator? That could be shelf stable. I mean, who would have known that we could have things that were made from super plants that have been used for 1,000 years in a part of the world that we just learned about? Who would have thought that medicinal functional mushrooms used for 1,000 years would now be at the top of the SPINS data as the number one category in our industry? But I think what's going to happen is we are always going to have people that buck the system, don't feel they need to make a change until there's an emergency or a life-threatening condition. That is going to continue because we're human and that's who we are. I think there's going to be a lot more people that are searching out a quality of life. And I think today we have better tools, better devices, better availability, and a much better selection of things to get you there. When I started, there were no blends and combinations. If you want to, for the eyes, you had to find everything separately. Today, you can walk into the vitamin candy store, if you will, and say, I need an eye formula, I need a digestive formula, I need a joint formula, I need a muscle formula, brain formula. A lot of the stuff is done for you. You just have to remember to take it. So I think the technology is going to be on our side. I think we're going to keep doing amazing ways of getting better delivery systems, like, to your point, methyl Bs, getting into your system more effectively. Regenerative agriculture is going to bring the highest quality herbs to the industry. I think we're going to have people that are making things easier to deliver. Not that I'm a big believer in gummies because I still think they're candy, but it opened up the door for the people that never take a capsule or a tablet to at least take something.
That's fair.
Family are doing the gummy thing, but you know what? God love them. So, I mean, they're getting something rather than nothing. But I do think we are going to still be human. I still think we're going to buck the system. I still think we're going to look for the magic wand. I don't think not everybody's going to have the dedication. And a lot of people are going to feel really bad until they decide to finally make a change, either out of necessity or fear.
Yeah, I've heard, I might get this wrong, but people won't change until the pain of not changing is greater than the pain of change. And let's face it, the status quo is comfortable for most of us, but all great things happen outside our comfort zone. We grow through pain. So yeah, I think the audience here naturally would get that, and that would resonate with them. Well, Jeff, where do we want to send people? How people that are interested in learning more, would like more education, want to connect with you? We mentioned your podcast a couple times. Where do you want to send folks to learn more and learn about you, connect with you?
Well, the easiest way to get a hold of me is just go to my webpage. And if you have an iPhone, you could just save it as an icon on your phone, and then tap it where you need it. It's drjeffreyburke.com. When you are there, you can tap on my Honest Health logo and it will take you to Spotify automatically. And that gives you all the audios that you can listen to, which I prefer people doing when they're driving and not watching the videos. And then also, if you tap on the YouTube logo, it'll take you to my YouTube page and you can actually watch the interviews, which I think is really fun. My email is on there. You could follow me on LinkedIn. You could follow me on Instagram. You could follow me on Facebook. Because, we're in kind of this situation, we make ourselves very achievable and very approachable, so I'm available out there. If you email me, I will email you back. If you leave me a message, I will return that message. And hopefully that you will enjoy the conversations that we have on my podcast as you do this one as well, which I think is fantastic. And just kudos to you for what you're doing, because I think this is fantastic. And, you're centering around people that are in the wonderful years of their life. And this is when we get really aware and we really notice. And many of us did a lot of the bad things, and now we're doing it better. We're more aware of our bodies and our mind and our mood, and we're more willing to make a difference and make a change because we want it.
Amen to that, brother. Yeah, absolutely love all that. All right, folks, I will make sure I get all of Jeff's information, the podcast info, the websites, all the socials. That'll be in the show notes for this episode. You guys can find that on whatever app you're listening to, or of course on our website. Jeff, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience, your passion with our audience, and absolutely love the work you're doing and encourage you to keep up the great work.
Thank you so much. It's been my absolute pleasure. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Okay, that's our show for today, folks. If you are interested in downloading our free Top 5 Over 50 Weight Loss Mistakes Guide, you folks can find the download link for that on whatever app you're listening to this on, or head over to silveredgefitness.com/354. As we wrap up our time together today, you can show your support for this show in two important ways. The first is to tell a friend about this podcast and encourage them to give it a listen. The second is for you YouTube folks to click the like and subscribe buttons, and for you podcast folks to please give this podcast a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, and be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss future episodes. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today, and until next time, stay strong.